The void screamed. It was not the sound of thunder or storm, but the deep, aching groan of reality tearing at its seams. Above the shrine world of Ophelia 7, a wound opened across the stars, a rift of blinding light that split the firmament like a blade through ancient parchment. The people of the Imperium fell to their knees, their prayers drowned beneath the choir of the warp. On the marble steps of the Basilica of St. Catherine, the Adepta Sororitas watched in silent awe. Canoness Veridiana's voice trembled as she spoke the litanies of protection, her rosary clutched so tightly the beads cut her fingers. Around her, the sky convulsed. Cherub servitors malfunctioned mid-hymn, their metallic wings sputtering before they fell like broken idols. Then came the light, pure, searing, and terrible. It cascaded through the clouds, flooding every cathedral spire and shrine tower with divine fire. Vox operators screamed of psychic interference. Astropaths clawed at their temples, whispering a single word before they burned from within. Arrival, within, arrival. Through the rift descended a figure. She did not fall. She landed as if the stars themselves had carried her. Golden armor gleamed even through the storm. A red mantle fluttered, torn by the winds of the immaterium. A face framed by dark curls and shadowed resolve was unmarked by the warp fire that devoured the heavens. For a heartbeat the world stood still. Then the first sister whispered, "A saint." Diana of the Misera looked upon the chaos of this new world, the cathedrals burning with their own sanctity, the mortals kneeling in fear rather than faith. Her hand tightened around the hilt of her sword, its divine metal humming softly against the madness that licked at her mind. She could feel it, something immense and malignant pressing against her thoughts, whispering through the unseen veil. The warp, a prison of souls and screams. Around her, the sisters of battle approached in formation, bolters drawn, helmets reflecting the unholy light. Their leader, Canoness Veridiana, advanced with measured steps, her crimson cloak dragging across scorched marble. "Identify yourself," she commanded, voice steady yet reverent. "If you are a demon, the Emperor's fire shall cleanse you. If you are divine food, then you will bow." Diana's tone was calm, not mocking but searching, her gaze sharp as the lasso at her hip, cut through the canoness's armor of faith. "I am no god, yet I serve the light. I come from a world beyond this one, torn through a wound not of my making." The canoness's eyes narrowed. A blasphemy. There are no worlds beyond his light. But before another word could be spoken, the heavens cracked again. From the rift spilled shapes. Shrieking, twisting echoes of chaos, demons clawing through the breach. The sisters reacted instantly, bolters roaring, hymns shouted through vox grills. Holy fire lit the skies as Diana turned toward the oncoming swarm, her instincts ignited. The air rippled as she leapt into battle, shield raised, sword blazing with celestial light. The first demon lunged, a thing of teeth and vapor, but her blade cleaved it in two, dissolving its form back into the warp. Her movements were a hymn of discipline and fury. Each strike precise, each parry an act of faith she did not yet share. The sisters watched in awe. Here was no saint as they knew them, no martyr trembling beneath the Emperor's will, but a warrior divine unafraid to stand between mortals and the abyss. The canoness herself paused mid-chant, her faith shaken not by doubt but by revelation. When the last demon fell, the sky began to heal. The rift, now dimming, collapsed upon itself, leaving only a smear of golden light that slowly faded into the void. The silence that followed was suffocating. Smoke coiled between the cathedral arches. The scent of promethium and blood hung heavy in the air. Diana knelt beside a wounded sister, her hand glowing faintly as she pressed it to the woman's chest. The bleeding stopped. The sister's eyes opened, confused, tearful. "You bear the Emperor's grace," she whispered. Diana shook her head gently. "Oh no, I carry only truth." The canoness approached, bolter lowered but voice still iron. "A truth is the Emperor's alone." "Oh, then your Emperor is blind," Diana said quietly, rising to meet her gaze. "Where I come from, truth is not owned, it is lived." For a long moment they stood in silence, two faiths staring into the mirror of one another. Around them the sisters gathered, whispering prayers of both reverence and fear. Some crossed themselves, others simply watched, uncertain whether they had witnessed a miracle or the beginning of damnation. High above, on the orbiting battle station Vigilant Reproach, Inquisitor Malky observed through the hololith feed, his expression unreadable. "A contact the Ordo Hereticus," he murmured to his acolyte. "There has been an incursion on Ophelia 7, a being of divine semblance and impossible origin." He leaned closer, eyes narrowing at the image of the warrior standing amidst the ruins. "If she defies the Imperium's truth, She will burn. As the transmission cut, the wind carried the distant echo of church bells. Diana looked to the sky where the wound had closed, feeling its aftertaste in her blood. There was no peace here, only faith sharpened into steel. She sensed it already. This world worshipped power, yet feared compassion, and in such a place mercy would be her most dangerous weapon. The canoness finally spoke, voice low, almost a prayer. "You will come with us, warrior. The ecclesiarchy will decide your fate, Diana's eyes, bright as molten gold, did not waver. "A fate," she murmured. "No, I have crossed galaxies to escape the chains of gods and men. But if your faith demands truth, then let it see me for what I am." Bolters surrounded her once more. She did not resist. The bells tolled louder, echoing across the burning cathedrals, a requiem for certainty. As she was led into the shadow of the basilica, the last flicker of light from the dying rift faded behind her. Somewhere beyond the stars, something vast stirred, watching, waiting, as the Imperium unknowingly welcomed a goddess into its cage, and in that silence the warp whispered her name like prophecy, Diana. The corridors of the basilica smelled of incense and oil, their vaulted ceilings echoing with distant hymns. Diana walked among the sisters like a spectre wrapped in gold, her armor scorched from battle yet gleaming with unbroken defiance. Shackles of sanctified adamantium bound her wrists, glowing faintly from the runes etched upon them. She could have broken them with a flick of her hand, but she did not. Strength meant nothing here. This was a place ruled by faith and fear, and she sought understanding before war. Canoness Veridiana walked beside her, rosary clinking softly against her armor. Her voice was low, guarded, the kind of tone reserved for those walking alongside blasphemy. "You will speak only when asked. You are to be presented before the ecclesiarch's tribunal for judgment. Until then, silence will protect you more than pride." "I have no pride in chains," Diana replied calmly, "only purpose." Veridiana's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. They continued through a procession of sisters and priests who watched the newcomer with a mixture of awe and revulsion. Some dropped to their knees, whispering prayers. Others made the sign of the Aquila, not in reverence but in warding. To them she was something between angel and curse. The chamber of judgment was vast, its walls carved with the visages of martyrs and saints, their eyes seeming to watch from stone. 1,000 candles burned, their light quivering as if in fear of what they were about to witness. In the center stood the dais, and upon it a robed figure in gold-trimmed crimson, Inquisitor Malki. He regarded her like a weapon half-forged, his eyes ancient and sharp. "You claim to have come from beyond our stars," he began, his voice steady and precise. "From a realm not known to the Imperium. Explain this heresy." Diana met his gaze without hesitation. "They come from a world where gods walk among mortals, where truth is not dictated by decree. The rift you call warp tore through my skies. It pulled me into its storm and cast me here." Her words rippled through the chamber like cold wind. The priest shifted uncomfortably. Malki's expression remained still, yet his fingers drummed upon his cane. "The warp devours, it does not deliver. What manner of demon survives its depths?" "Are not a demon," Diana said softly. "They warrior of truth." The Inquisitor's eyes narrowed. "The truth is mutable. It bends to the will of the Emperor. And what if truth stands apart from will?" she asked, the calm steel in her tone unsettling. "What if your Emperor's light shines only because it fears the dark it creates?" Gasps rippled through the hall. A sister drew her bolter before Veridiana's hand halted her. The canoness's expression was unreadable, torn between duty and a growing sense of awe. Malki stepped closer, the incense thick around them. "You speak with conviction," he said. Yet conviction is the language of heresy. He gestured to the tech priests beside him. "Activate the litanies of truth." The priests began to chant, their mechanical voices merging into a single droning hymn. The runes on Diana's shackles flared to life, their glow crawling up her arms like chains of fire. Pain surged through her, not physical but spiritual. The kind that sought to pierce the soul and expose its lies. She did not resist. Her breath steadied, her eyes closing as the chamber filled with blinding light. The hymn intensified until the walls trembled. Then, as quickly as it began, it ended. The light dimmed. Malki stared at the readings projected into the air by the servo skull beside him. The glyphs pulsed erratically, defying logic. No corruption, no trace of the warp, no psychic taint. "Impossible," he whispered. "She is pure," one of the priests murmured, almost in disbelief. Malky's hand struck the altar, silencing them, and nothing that falls through the warp remains pure. He hissed. He turned his gaze back to Diana, searching for deceit in her calm expression. "What power shields you from corruption?" "My will," she said simply, "and the truth I carry." The silence that followed was heavy. Veridiana watched the Inquisitor, saw the tremor in his jaw, not of fear but of doubt. That alone was more dangerous than any demon. Malky straightened, his voice measured once more. "You will remain under ecclesiastic watch. The Ordo Hereticus will conduct further inquiry. Until then you are forbidden to leave the sanctum." Diana inclined her head. "I will not run from judgment." As the tribunal dispersed, Veridiana lingered. She studied the stranger, her faith warring with the sight of what she could not explain. "You fought with valor," she said at last. "And yet you refused to name the Emperor as your god." Why? Diana's eyes softened. "Because where I come from, gods are not worshipped. They are questioned, tested by the weight of their mercy. Perhaps your Emperor would not fear such truth." Veridiana's lips parted as if to respond, but the words never came. Instead, she turned sharply, armor clattering as she walked away. Diana watched her go, sensing the fracture in the woman's certainty. Night fell upon Ophelia 7. From her cell's narrow window, Diana looked out upon the city of cathedrals, its countless candles flickering like imprisoned stars. The hymns from below rose faintly through the air, prayers for salvation whispered by those who did not understand they were already free. She closed her eyes and felt the echo of the warp still lingering around her, faint but persistent. Somewhere beyond that veil of madness, something stirred, a presence old as divinity itself. She could almost hear their voices, faint as memory, the gods of Olympus calling her name across eternity, their words swallowed by the sea of screams that was the warp. She turned from the window, her resolve hardening. This world's faith was a weapon, its mercy a weakness. If she was to survive here, she would need to walk its path of fire, not as a goddess, but as proof that even in the darkest empire, light could still defy command. In the halls beyond her cell, Canoness Veridiana paused in prayer, her rosary trembling between her fingers. The warrior's words haunted her thoughts, whispering a forbidden truth she dared not speak aloud. For the first time in years, she wondered if devotion and blindness had become one and the same, and in that quiet moment of doubt, the seeds of something dangerous began to grow. The bells of the basilica tolled at dawn, their iron voices summoning the faithful and the fearful alike. In the dim corridor beneath the cathedral of St. Verena, Diana waited. Her chains had been removed, replaced with ceremonial bindings woven from blessed silk, a symbol of submission before the emperor's light. But the air carried no reverence, only judgment. She could feel it in the footsteps echoing above, the murmured prayers that trembled with suspicion rather than faith. Canoness Veridiana entered first, her armor freshly polished, her eyes cold with duty. "The Inquisitor has ordered your trial of purity," she said, her tone sharp and impersonal. "If you are divine, the light of the Emperor will embrace you. If not, the fire will unmask your deceit." Diana met her gaze, and if neither occurs, Veridiana hesitated. "Then the Inquisition will decide what truth to make of you." Two sisters escorted Diana through the winding halls, their bolters lowered but ready. They emerged into the basilica's heart, a vast circular chamber open to the morning light filtering through stained glass. The scene was almost beautiful. Utter scene was almost beautiful. Incense coiled upward in ghostly tendrils. The choir's chant reverberated like the heartbeat of a slumbering god. Rows of sisters knelt on either side, armor gleaming, eyes hidden behind visors. Matters. At the center stood the Inquisitor, flanked by priests and mechanized servitors bearing relics of judgment. "Bring forth the subject," Malky commanded. His voice was not loud, yet it carried with the weight of centuries. Diana was led to the dais, where a relic of the Emperor's own armor stood enshrined behind golden glass. The Inquisitor gestured, and a priest opened the reliquary, revealing the relic's sacred glow. "Kneel before his light," Malky said. "If you are pure, it shall welcome you. If you are tainted, it shall consume you." Diana's eyes lingered on the relic. She sensed no divinity within it, only belief hardened by suffering into power. But she knelt. The floor was cold beneath her, the air thick with incense and scrutiny. The relic began to hum. Faint at first, then louder, resonating with the pulse of her heartbeat. The light brightened, shifting from gold to a blinding white. The sisters gasped. The choir faltered. Energy surged through the chamber, rattling the icons and cracking the marble floor. Malky stepped forward, raising his staff. "Hold the purity wards." He barked, but the wards burned out, their power overwhelmed. The light enveloped Diana completely. Her armor shone as if molten, her eyes glowing like twin suns. She saw visions, fleeting, chaotic, not of her world, but of this one. Endless war, devotion twisted into obedience, faith used as a blade. She saw the Emperor, vast and unmoving upon his throne, surrounded by machinery that screamed silently across millennia. She felt his gaze, distant yet all-consuming, and beneath it she felt sorrow. Then, as swiftly as it began, the light receded. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The relic dimmed, smoke rose from the altar, and the scent of ozone lingered in the air. Diana stood unharmed. Her bindings had burned away, reduced to drifting ash. The Inquisitor's face was unreadable. He turned toward his retinue, a report, the servo-skull word projecting data into the air. No trace of warp corruption detected, no mutation, no psychic resonance measurable within standard Imperial parameters. A murmur ran through the sisters. The canoness bowed her head, lips moving in silent prayer. Malky's jaw tightened. The Emperor's relic reacted, he said. Something within her drew it forth. "Explain that." "I do not explain what I do not understand," Diana answered. "But whatever your relic saw in me, it did not destroy it." Perhaps it could not, Veridiana murmured, half in awe. Malky's gaze flicked to her, sharp as a blade. "Do not mistake anomaly for divinity, canoness." He turned back to Diana. "You may have passed this trial, but faith does not yield to miracles. It demands obedience, man's obedience. You are to be confined until your nature is fully discerned. Defy that and no relic will save you." He signaled to the guards, but Diana did not move. "Tell me, Inquisitor," she said softly, "what becomes of your faith when it finds something it cannot explain?" His expression darkened. "It endures, as it always has, as it always will." Diana inclined her head, not in submission but acknowledgement. "Then may it endure the truth." She allowed herself to be led away, her expression calm though her thoughts churned. The vision of the Emperor lingered in her mind, not as a tyrant, but as a prisoner bound to his own creation. She felt pity, and pity in this world was blasphemy. As she passed beneath the stained glass archways, the light caught her armor, scattering across the walls like 1,000 suns. Many among the sisters bowed their heads, unable to look directly at her. Others turned away, whispering prayers of fear. Inquisitor Malky remained at the dais, staring at the relic that had glowed for the first time in centuries. He touched its edge and felt warmth. Not divine, but human. Doubt crept into him like a shadow beneath the flame. When the doors closed behind Diana, the chamber seemed emptier, the air colder. The Inquisitor's voice broke the silence at last. "Achimoness," he said quietly, "keep watch upon her. The galaxy has no place for new gods." Veridiana bowed, her expression unreadable. But as she turned to follow, she whispered a single word beneath her breath. Not prayer, not curse, but something closer to hope. "Perhaps," she said, "it needs one." The storm came without warning. One moment the sky above Ophelia 7 was clear. The next it churned with crimson clouds, the scent of iron and incense thick in the air. From the cathedral's highest spire, Diana felt the world tremble. The air vibrated with screams that had no mouths, whispers that bled through the stone walls of the basilica. The warp had returned. She stood within her sanctum, guarded but unbound. Canoness Veridiana had argued for leniency, claiming the trial proved her purity. The Inquisitor, however, had stationed watchful eyes around her chamber, each sister sworn to shoot should she defy them. But when the first explosion echoed across the city, none hesitated as the alarms began to wail. "A chaos forces breaching the southern district," cried a Vox officer. Occultists and something larger. Diana stepped toward the window. In the distance, the horizon glowed red with fire. The streets below filled with citizens fleeing toward the basilica, their cries a single plea for salvation. Yet among them, shadows moved, the corrupted, the broken, those whose faith had already turned to madness. She could sense their hatred, their pain, their joy in destruction. Veridiana entered the chamber, helm beneath her arm, face lit by the reflections of flame. "You will remain here," she ordered. "The Inquisition will deal with this. You cannot fight a storm with doctrine," Diana said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "You need more than faith. You need more than faith. You need will. The Emperor provides both," Veridiana snapped. "Then let him provide through me." The canoness hesitated, torn between conviction and the memory of what she had seen at the trial. Outside, the basilica shook as distant artillery boomed. A stained glass window shattered, scattering colored light like blood across the floor. Diana stepped closer. "You know I can help." Veridiana's jaw tightened. "If you defy his light, I will stand beneath it." For a heartbeat, the canoness met her gaze, then threw the helm onto her head and signaled the guards. "Release her." The sisters obeyed. As the last restraint fell away, Diana strode from the chamber, her movements fluid and purposeful. In the cathedral's armory, she passed rows of relics and weapons. She took none. Her blade, forged in another world, still hummed faintly with its own divine resonance. When she stepped into the city streets, the full horror unfolded. The cultists of the ruinous powers flooded the avenues, their bodies tattooed with blasphemies, their mouths chanting praises to the dark gods. Demons shimmered in and out of existence, their forms half flesh, half phantasm. The sisters of battle met them with fire and faith. Bolters roared, flamers belched holy fire. Hymns filled the air, rising in pitch as more sisters fell. Diana joined them without hesitation, a flash of gold amid the crimson chaos. She moved like a storm given form, shield raised, sword slashing through demonic flesh. Each strike burned with radiant energy, severing the creature's link to the warp. Her presence drew eyes and voices. The cultists screamed of a false saint, of a golden witch who defied the gods. Veridiana fought beside her, bolters spitting rounds into the masses. Between volleys she glanced at Diana, her movements, her precision, her restraint. There was no rage in her strikes, only sorrow and resolve. A massive demon emerged from the flames, its wings blotting out the cathedral's spires. Its voice was a chorus of blighted souls. "The false light walks among you," it roared. "She is ours to claim." Diana turned toward it, eyes narrowing. "You speak of ownership as if it were strength." The creature lunged, claws tearing through the cobblestones. Diana met it mid-charge, her blade flashing upward. The impact shook the earth. The demon screamed as its form dissolved into ash, its body unable to bear the purity of her strike. The sisters faltered in awe. Veridiana lowered her weapon slowly. For the first time she felt faith not as command, but as awakening. Yet the victory came with cost. Around them lay the broken, sisters burned, civilians torn apart. Diana knelt beside one, a young novice whose chest rose faintly beneath shattered armor. Without thinking, she placed her hand upon the wound. Light bloomed beneath her palm, flesh knitted, breath returned. The surviving sisters gasped. One whispered, "A miracle." Diana looked up, her expression unreadable. "A no miracle. Compassion." The canoness's voice was low, shaken. "The Emperor works through his chosen." Or perhaps, Diana said, "He reminds you of what you were before you forgot how to see." Before Veridiana could reply, a distant explosion tore through the northern wall of the city. The vox crackled with shouts of retreat. The cult's leader approaches, a sorcerer of the word bearers. The line is collapsing. Diana rose. "Then we hold it." Veridiana looked at her, conflicted, then nodded. "For the Emperor," she said. "For humanity," Diana answered. Together they led the charge through the burning streets. The sorcerer waited them atop a ruined shrine, his armor crimson and script-covered, his staff crackling with warp lightning. He sneered at the sight of them. With the god's hunger for truth, he hissed. "Shall we see whose is greater?" The battle was swift and brutal. Bolter fire met sorcery, and the air ignited with unnatural fury. The sorcerer unleashed tendrils of warp energy, but Diana's shield absorbed them, the impact shaking her to her core. She advanced, step by step, through fire and screaming air, until her sword met his staff. With a single ringing strike, she shattered it. The warp recoil consumed him, imploding his body into a vortex of light and shadow. The sky shuddered, and the remaining cultists fell silent, leaderless, broken, afraid. When the smoke cleared, the sisters gathered among the ruins. The bells began to toll again, not for death, but for survival. Diana stood amid the devastation, her armor scorched, her face serene. Armor scorched, her face serene. Veridiana approached, removing her helm. "You saved them," she said quietly. Diana shook her head. "They saved themselves. I only reminded them how." The canoness looked at her long and hard. "And what are you then, if not a saint?" Diana met her gaze, her voice steady, almost mournful. "A witness." High above, the clouds parted for a moment and a single ray of light fell upon her, neither divine nor accidental, simply present. The sisters fell to their knees, some weeping, others whispering prayers. Veridiana bowed her head, torn between faith and revelation. Far away in the shadows of the basilica, Inquisitor Melqui watched through the feed of a servo skull. His eyes were cold, "So the heretic plays the savior," he murmured. "Then let the next trial test her mercy." The transmission ended. The fires of Ophelia 7 smoldered for 3 days before the smoke cleared. When it did, the planet's surface bore new scars, charred sanctuaries, shattered icons, and the ruins of faith rebuilt through blood. Yet amid the ashes, a name spread faster than the flames had ever burned. They called her the Saint of Wrath. The ecclesiarchy denied the title, but it clung to the tongues of the faithful. Pilgrims arrived from distant systems, their ships blotting the sky with their numbers. They came bearing relics, prayers, and doubt. They came seeking miracles. And when they spoke her name in their hymns, the air itself seemed to tremble. Within the basilica, Diana stood before the shattered altar she had defended. Her armor was being repaired by the Mechanicus priests, though she had refused most of their offers. "A metal does not make the warrior," she had told them. "A conviction does." Yet the hall around her no longer felt like a place of worship. It felt like a weapon waiting to be used. Canoness Veridiana entered quietly, helm tucked beneath her arm, the scent of oil and sanctified ash following her. She studied Diana in silence before speaking. "You have become something the people do not understand. They pray to you, and that frightens them. A faith often fears what it awakens," Diana said softly. "All people saw light when all they had known was shadow. That is not a sin. That is not a sin." Perhaps not," Veridiana replied, "but the Inquisition sees it differently." Diana turned toward her, eyes calm but sharp. "Amalki." The canoness nodded. "He has sent word to Terra. They are calling for examination by the Synod Ministra. They wish to know whether you are to be canonized or condemned." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moaned through the broken stained glass, scattering fragments of color across the marble floor. Diana's gaze drifted toward the ruins of the city visible beyond. "They seek to name what they do not understand, to control it." "That is the Imperium's way," Veridiana said. "A control is safety, obedience is survival." "And yet," Diana said, "obedience is what nearly destroyed you." The canoness hesitated, her lips tightening. "You speak as though you have the right to question the Emperor's design." "I question everything that hides behind divinity," Diana said quietly. "Even myself." Before Veridiana could answer, the sound of boots echoed through the corridor. Inquisitor Malky appeared, flanked by 2 stormtroopers in polished carapace armor. His expression was one of weary calculation. "The Saint of Wrath," he said, the title cutting through the air like mockery. "But people kneel in your name, yet you claim no godhood. Curious." "I claim no throne," Diana replied evenly. "Only truth." Malky smiled thinly. "A truth is a luxury we cannot afford. Faith holds the Imperium together. Without it, there is nothing but the warp." He stepped closer, the faint scent of burned incense clinging to his robes. "Your mercy to the enemy has raised concern. You spared Chaos cultists after the battle. You allowed the tainted to live. They were unarmed," Diana said. "Their minds broken, killing them would not heal your faith." "It would protect it," Malky countered. "Mercy invites heresy. Compassion is the seed from which corruption blooms." Diana's jaw tightened. "Then your empire is already lost." The chamber fell silent. The stormtroopers shifted uneasily, their fingers near their triggers. Veridiana stepped between them before the tension could ignite. "Inquisitor," she said, her voice calm but firm. Her actions saved Ophelia 7. Without her, the basilica would have fallen. Perhaps, Malky said, turning away, "but miracles without sanction are still heresy." He glanced over his shoulder. "The Synod will judge her soon. Until then, she will remain under my supervision." "And if the Synod finds her guilty?" Veridiana asked. The Inquisitor's eyes gleamed beneath the low light. "Then her sainthood will end in fire." He departed, leaving the scent of ozone and tension behind him. Veridiana looked at Diana, unsure whether to speak. But Diana had already turned toward the altar, her gaze lingering on the cracked symbol of the Aquila. "In my world," she said quietly, "a god once told me that truth is forged in struggle. I see now that here it is buried beneath it." The canoness stepped closer. "If you defy them, you will not survive. The Inquisition does not lose its prey." "I do not seek to defy them," Diana replied. "Only to show them what they've forgotten." "And what is that?" "That faith without mercy is tyranny." Veridiana's breath caught. The words were dangerous, words that could unmake an empire if spoken too loudly. She lowered her voice. "You are walking toward martyrdom." "Perhaps that is what this world needs," Diana said. "A martyr not for power, but for truth." Night descended over the basilica once more. Outside, the pilgrims' chants echoed through the streets, mingling with the toll of the cathedral bells. They sang of a warrior who stood against darkness, who bled not for the emperor but for them. And with every verse, the myth grew stronger. From his private chamber, Malky watched the crowds on the hololith feed. Their torches burned like constellations across the plaza. He poured wine into a glass but did not drink. "She is no saint," he murmured. "She is a spark, and sparks burn worlds." In the courtyard below, Diana knelt among the wounded, tending to the survivors who had come seeking her touch. Her hands glowed faintly, though she no longer understood how. The energy that flowed through her felt ancient, neither divine nor profane, but something older than both. A child reached for her hand. "Will you stay, lady?" the girl asked. "Will you save us again if the monsters come?" Diana smiled softly, brushing soot from the child's cheek. "If they come," she said, "we will save each other." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of burned incense and prayers half-spoken. Above, the basilica's bells tolled again, but this time they sounded less like devotion and more like warning. In the shadowed heights of the tower, unseen by all below, a figure in a crimson hood whispered into the vox. "The saint gathers followers. The ordo will not wait long. Prepare the rite." The message cut into static as thunder rolled over the city, echoing like the voice of judgment itself. The air above Ophelia 7 burned with the scent of war once more. Days after the uprising of faith had spread across the shrine world, the heavens themselves cracked under the thunder of voidcraft. The banners of the Imperium were not alone this time. They were joined by the obsidian sigils of the Black Legion. From orbit descended vessels like daggers of night, their engines whispering the promise of ruin. Diana stood upon the ramparts of the Basilica Eternal, her gaze fixed upon the descending fire. Around her, sisters of battle prepared for the onslaught. Bolters were loaded, prayers recited, and hymns of defiance rose into the storm. Veridiana moved among them, her voice calm but unyielding. "Hold your lines, the Emperor watches. We strike at their landing point before they fortify. Faith is not walls, it is fire. Let it burn." The sisters followed without question. Their formation swept through the war-torn streets like a river of flame. The Black Legion's drop zones were engulfed in combat as Diana led the charge, her presence igniting the will of every soldier who saw her. Even the wounded rose to fight again, voices lifted in defiance. When the bombardments ceased, the battlefield was unrecognizable. Towers lay in ruin, the earth itself torn apart. Yet among the devastation stood Diana and her warriors, bloodied but unbroken. The surviving sisters gathered around her, chanting prayers of victory and sorrow. Veridiana approached, removing her helm, her face streaked with grime and tears. "They will call this a miracle," she said softly, "but the Inquisition will see only heresy." Diana looked upon the ruins of the holy city. Let them. Faith that cannot survive truth is not faith, it is fear. The canoness bowed her head. "You speak like one who has known gods." "Ye have," Diana said, her voice quiet, heavy with memory, "and I have seen them fall." The storm above finally began to break. Faint sunlight pierced the clouds, glinting off shattered marble and broken icons. For a moment, peace seemed possible. But far beyond the planet, in the dark between stars, new fleets stirred, unseen eyes watching, calculating, preparing to descend. Diana felt it then, not as vision but as instinct. This battle was no victory, it was an invitation. The Imperium would come, the Inquisition would come. And when they did, they would not bring faith, they would bring judgment. The fires of the battle had barely dimmed when the summons came. Inquisitor Malky's voice, carried through Vox command, demanded Diana's immediate presence in the sanctum beneath the basilica. Veridiana had argued, pleaded for delay, but the Inquisitor's orders were absolute. The Emperor's will, he said, must not wait upon miracles. Diana descended through the ruined cathedral halls, her armor still marked with soot and blood, The sisters that had once whispered prayers now bowed as she passed, unsure whether they honored her or feared her. Their eyes held the question none dared to speak, saint or heretic. The chamber awaiting her was lit only by the glow of candles and the crimson sigil of the Ordo Hereticus etched into the wall behind the Inquisitor's throne. Malky sat there like a sculpted shadow, flanked by stormtroopers and priests whose faces were hidden beneath hoods of black silk. The air tasted of oil and sanctity, both heavy, both suffocating. A step forward, Malky commanded. His voice carried the cold weight of judgment. You stand before the throne's representative, accused of dangerous influence upon the faithful, of heresy through unorthodox mercy, and of claiming power not granted by the emperor. I claim no power, Diana replied. Only purpose, only purpose. Your purpose is a blade sharper than any demon's claw, the Inquisitor said, and like any weapon it must be wielded by the righteous or destroyed. Veridiana stood nearby, silent and pale beneath her armor. She had been forced to bear witness, though every instinct within her screamed to speak. But she saw the look in Malki's eyes, the fanatic calm of a man who would burn 1,000 innocents to preserve one truth. You have gathered followers, he continued, rising from his seat. You heal the wounded with hands unblessed, you speak of compassion where faith demands wrath, and you stand above canoness and priest alike. Tell me, outsider, who gave you the right to lead my emperor's warriors? The people gave it, Diana answered softly. Not because I sought it, but because they saw in me what they have forgotten in themselves. Strength born of mercy. Faith without chains. Malki's expression hardened. A faith is the chain that binds man to order. Without it, there is only ruin. And yet you live in ruin, Diana said, stepping closer, her voice steady, low, dangerous. You wage endless war for a god who cannot speak. You destroy what you do not understand and call it purity. How many have you burned, Inquisitor, only to find your faith unchanged? The stormtroopers raised their weapons at once. Veridiana moved instinctively between them, her tone sharp but reverent. Enough. She speaks truth, though it burns the ear. If she meant heresy, she would not have bled for us. Malki's gaze flicked toward her, cold as a blade. You defend her because she mirrors your doubt, Canoness. Be careful, doubt is the first language of the warp. Veridiana's lips trembled, but she held her ground. Doubt is not corruption, she said quietly. It is humanity. It is humanity. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber, broken only by the slow drip of wax from the candles. Malki turned back to Diana, his composure regained. You mistake defiance for truth. The Emperor's silence is not absence, it is command. You will submit to his will, or you will be purged. Diana's eyes narrowed, her calm unbroken. I have faced gods and tyrants. I have seen power twist itself into faith and faith into chains. If your emperor's will demands the death of compassion, then perhaps he is not what you believe him to be. The words struck like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed among the priests. One of the stormtroopers muttered a prayer, his finger tightening on the trigger, but Malki raised a hand, his expression unreadable. A blasphemy, he said softly, almost with reverence. A pure and unfiltered. I see now why they follow you. You speak like an angel and wound like a demon. But I will unmask you, Golden One. You will face the ultimate trial of devotion. He gestured toward the center of the room, where the Mechanicus priests had prepared a device, an ancient construct of chains and glowing runes. The chains of devotion, Malki intoned. Forged during the age of apostasy to reveal the soul's allegiance, it burns heresy, it sanctifies truth. Diana looked upon it with calm disdain, and yet it was built by men chosen by the Emperor, Malki corrected. You will wear them, and you will pray. If you are pure, they will bless you. If not, they will kill me, she finished. Very well. Veridiana's eyes widened. No, Diana stepped forward before the canoness could stop her. She placed her hands upon the glowing metal. The chains coiled around her arms like living serpents, burning bright as they locked in place. Pain lanced through her body, pure and searing, yet she made no sound. The priests began their chant. The symbols ignited. The light filled the chamber, blinding in its intensity. For a moment it seemed the device would consume her entirely. Then silence. The glow dimmed, the air cooled. Diana stood unscathed, the chains melted to ash at her feet. Malki's breath caught, the priest froze. Veridiana fell to her knees, tears streaking her face. You see, Diana whispered, voice trembling with quiet strength. A faith does not need chains. It needs truth. Malki turned away, hiding the fear that had broken through his composure. This is not over. And no, Diana said, her tone calm, almost sorrowful. It has only begun. As she left the chamber, Veridiana followed, her steps uncertain but her faith no longer blind. Behind them, the Inquisitor stared at the ashes of his relic, his reflection flickering in the dying light. He whispered a prayer, but this time it was not for strength, it was for certainty. The night that followed was silent, unnaturally so. The fires of battle had died, and the smoke no longer rose from the basilica's wounds, but the air felt heavy with something unseen, a tension that lived beneath the stone and within the hearts of all who had witnessed Diana's trial. To the people, she was now beyond question, a living testament that even the Emperor's instruments could not condemn. To the Inquisition, she was proof that the impossible had entered their domain. Diana walked alone through the cloisters of the basilica, her bare hands tracing the carved reliefs of saints and martyrs, whose faces seemed to shift beneath the candlelight. Every eye was hollow, every gesture supplicant. She paused before one statue, Saint Mina, the martyr of pyres, who had burned herself alive to cleanse a city of sin. The plaque beneath bore a single phrase, "Purity is obedience." Her fingers brushed the words. "No," she murmured, "a purity is truth." Her reflection in the polished marble behind her wavered, and for a moment she thought she saw not her own face, but another, proud, radiant, crowned with olive leaves. The scent of sea air replaced the incense. The marble became white stone beneath a blue sky, a Diana, Unther. The voice was soft, distant, echoing as if carried across eternity. She turned. There, standing within the shimmer of unreality, was her mother, Hippolyta, queen of the Mycera, her armor silver, her eyes sorrowful. "You should not be here," Diana whispered. "Nor should you," the vision replied, her voice like the sea's lament. "The realm you walk now is one the gods themselves dare not tread. The warp stirs around you, child. Its hunger is endless." Diana stepped closer, though she knew the illusion could not touch her. "I did not choose this place. I was cast here through rift and flame. And yet even here you lead," Hippolyta said. "Even in the lands of madness, they call you goddess. You have always carried divinity within you, and divinity draws its predators." The light flickered. Behind Hippolyta, shapes moved. Vast, writhing shadows whispering words she could not comprehend. Diana heard fragments of names, Slanesh, Korn, Tizinchi, each syllable pressing against her skull like claws. Her mother's form wavered, pain flickering across her face. "They have felt you, Diana Rea. The gods of this world hunger for your essence. You are not of their making, and that makes you an affront to their dominion." "Then let them come," Diana said, her voice iron. "I have faced gods before. This is not Olympus Istrilithafornd. These are not gods born of ideals. They are corruption given shape. You cannot fight belief with strength alone." "I do not intend to fight belief," Diana said, "only the lies that feed it." The vision's gaze softened. "And what of your own gods? What of your truth?" Diana hesitated. The memory of her old world flickered like a dying flame. The laughter of her sisters, the scent of salt and sunlight, the voices of gods who had watched and tested but never ruled. "My truth remains," she said quietly. Even here, the illusion began to fade, her mother's voice growing faint. "Then remember it, my daughter, for when they come to unmake you, it will be all you have left." The marble cloister returned. The scent of incense overwhelmed the sea breeze. Diana stood alone, her hands trembling slightly, the echo of that other voice still lingering like a heartbeat within her mind. She turned and found Veridiana standing at the archway, watching her. "You were speaking to someone," the canoness said softly. "Only memory," Diana replied. Veridiana stepped closer, her eyes searching. "Your power, it grows. The people speak of visions of light where none should be. Some claim to have seen your shadow burning in the sky during the battle." "A faith transforms what it does not understand," Diana said. "Do they believe because they see? Or do they see because they believe?" "Perhaps both," Veridiana answered. "But it frightens them. It frightens me." Diana looked at her, and for a moment there was no warrior, no saint, only a woman burdened by endless expectation. "You are afraid I will become what they worship." "I'm afraid you already have." Before Diana could respond, the vox burst to life. The voice of a sergeant crackled through the static. "A canoness. Unidentified psychic activity in the eastern quarter. The dead. There, rising." Veridiana's expression hardened. "The Black Legion's tainted," she said. "The warp has touched the corpses left after the bombardment." "No," Diana said quietly, eyes narrowing. "This is something else." They ran through the basilica's corridors, emerging into the open square beyond the walls. The sight that met them chilled even Diana's blood. The bodies of fallen sisters and civilians alike twitched, then rose, not with the jerking stiffness of necromancy, but fluidly, as though pulled upright by invisible strings. Their eyes burned with faint blue fire. From the shadows stepped a figure draped in priestly robes, his voice carrying through the storm. "Behold the saint's miracle," he called. "Even the dead rise to praise her name." The crowd gasped. Pilgrims dropped to their knees. Veridiana's eyes widened in horror. "That is not your doing." "We know," Diana said. "This is corruption disguised as faith." She strode forward, her sword unsheathed, its light illuminating the ghastly scene. "Enough," her voice thundered. "These souls are not yours to command." The figure turned toward her, his smile serene and cruel. "All souls belong to Faith, Saint of Wrath. Even yours." The risen dead moved as one, advancing toward her. Diana raised her shield, light flaring across the square. The ground cracked beneath her as she drove her blade into the stone. The light that erupted was blinding, washing over the corpses like a cleansing storm. When it faded, silence returned. The dead were still again. The priest had vanished. Veridiana stared at the scorched ground, her voice shaking. That was no man, that was a message. Diana's gaze lingered on the horizon, where the sky pulsed faintly with warp light. "Yes," she said, "the gods of this place have seen me, and now they have begun to speak." By dawn, the city of Ophelia 7 was quiet once more, but beneath that stillness something had changed. The people's prayers had grown louder, almost feverish. Pilgrims filled the basilica's steps, chanting Diana's name until the air trembled with devotion, and from orbit ships bearing the sigils of the ecclesiarchy began to arrive, not in celebration but in judgment. Veridiana stood beside Diana at the high balcony overlooking the sea of faithful below. The canoness's face was pale, her armor dented from the last battle, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "The High Synod has spoken," she said softly. "They are calling it a crusade." Diana turned from the crowd, her brow furrowing. "Against whom?" "Against you," Veridiana whispered. "Against what they call the heresy of mercy." The words hung in the air like ash. From the basilica's bell tower came the slow toll of morning chimes, deep, resonant, and final. The decree had been signed on Terra itself, delivered by astropathic flame. The ecclesiarchy had branded Diana's movement a contagion, a corruption of faith. Every pilgrim who prayed to her, every sister who knelt in her name, was now an enemy of the Imperium. Below, the people still sang, unaware. Their voices rose like the tide. Diana looked down at them, thousands of souls broken yet believing. They had found hope where there had been only obedience, and now that hope would burn. Veridiana's voice trembled. "The Inquisition has already declared an exterminatus fleet on standby. If the cult of the Saint of Wrath continues to spread, they will purge the planet." Diana turned, her expression unreadable. "You call them cultists," she said, "but they are only people who wish to live without fear. They pray for compassion, and you offer them fire. You offer them fire." "That is the Imperium's way," Veridiana said bitterly. "It does not bend, it consumes." "Then it has already devoured its soul," Diana replied. From the shadows behind them, another voice cut through the tension. "Then remember what it means to protect it." And then the light flared. The fleet systems failed in unison. Reactors shut down. Orbital cannons powered down mid-charge. Across the stars, silence fell. On the planet below, Veridiana looked skyward, tears cutting through the soot on her face. "She stopped them," she whispered. "By the Emperor, Malki turned toward her, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. "No," he said, voice trembling. "Not by the Emperor, by herself." The sky still burned with her light. And for the first time in 10,000 years, an imperial world saw the heavens not as judgment, but as mercy. The silence that followed her ascent was unlike any that had ever graced Ophelia Rovin. No hymns, no prayers, no screams, only the heavy stillness that follows a miracle too vast to comprehend. The bombardment had ceased. The sky glowed faintly with the afterlight of Diana's act, a wound of radiance that refused to fade. Ships that had come to destroy now drifted powerless, their crews whispering of angels and heresy in the same breath. On the surface, chaos rippled through the ranks of the faithful. Some fell to their knees, proclaiming her the Emperor reborn. Others wept in fear, convinced the end times had come. Within the Basilica Eternal, Inquisitor Malki stood before the shattered altar, his hands trembling for the first time in decades. The Vox screamed with reports. Engines silenced, reactors offline, no explanation. "This cannot be," he muttered, though his voice betrayed the truth. He no longer knew what could or could not be. Canoness Veridiana entered the hall, her armor still dusted with ash. "You saw it," she said softly. "You felt it." Malki turned toward her, his eyes hollow. "I felt the warp shudder. I felt reality bend. Whatever she is not divine. No mortal, no saint could wield such power. And yet she saved us," Veridiana replied. "Not for herself. Not for faith. For life. Malki slammed his hand against the altar. A salvation without faith is corruption. The Emperor's light needs no aid from false gods. Veridiana's voice hardened. Then perhaps the Emperor's light has dimmed. The words struck him like a blade. His hand went to his sidearm, half by instinct, half by fury, but he stopped, his breath ragged. For the first time he saw not a subordinate, but a believer standing in defiance of his authority. "Careful, Canoness," he said quietly. "You tread close to the edge." Veridiana met his gaze without fear. "I crossed it the moment I saw her bleed for us." The Inquisitor's silence was answer enough. Enough. Far above them, Diana drifted in the void, surrounded by the hulks of the immobilized fleet. The stars shimmered coldly around her. She could hear their voices, thousands of mortals whispering her name through open channels, their awe and terror carrying across the vacuum. She did not know if they prayed or begged, only that each word reached her like a weight. Her armor floated in fragments around her, pieces scorched by the energy she had unleashed. The power that had answered her will was still burning within her veins, neither divine nor mortal, but something caught between. She could feel it pressing outward like a tide she struggled to contain. The war pulsed faintly beyond her sight, restless, aware. And then she heard it again, the whisper, the same voice that had haunted her since the vision of her mother. But now it was different, deeper, layered with 1,000 tones. "Daughter of Olympus," it said, "not in words but in thought. You wield what even gods feared. Do you not see? You are not their servant. You are their equal." The stars flickered. In that moment she glimpsed shapes beyond comprehension, vast entities drifting in the warp, their forms shifting like clouds of fire and thought. One of them extended toward her, a hand not of flesh but of concept. She felt it brush against her mind, promising power beyond imagining, dominion over faith itself. "Begone," she whispered, voice trembling with effort. "I am not yours." "You already are," the voice replied. "You cross the veil. You command light that does not belong to this galaxy. They will never accept you. The only truth left to you is the one you create." The light around her dimmed. For a heartbeat she felt herself slip, her thoughts pulled toward that endless hunger, that promise of godhood without purpose. Then deep within her memory she saw the Misera again, the laughter of her sisters, the calm of unbroken sea, the words of her mother, "Truth is not power, it is choice." Her eyes opened. The void glowed once more. She spoke not to the voice but to herself. "I am not here to rule. I am here to remind them what it means to be human." The presence recoiled, its laughter fading into the warp. The stars fell silent again. When she returned to the planet, the air burned as she descended. The people gathered in the square fell to their knees, their cries filling the air like a storm. Veridiana was there among them, her expression torn between awe and grief. Diana landed upon the shattered marble steps of the basilica. Her armor glowed faintly, though her face showed exhaustion deeper than any wound. The moment her feet touched the ground, the people surged forward, voices rising in one cry, "Ah, Saint Diana, Saint of Mercy!" She raised a hand and the sound fell away. "I am no saint," she said, her voice carrying across the square like the wind before a storm. "Do not worship me. Worship the light within yourselves, the courage to see truth, even when it burns." The crowd listened, uncertain, torn between reverence and confusion. Malki stepped forward, his robes torn, his face shadowed. "You speak blasphemy," he said hoarsely. "You deny the Emperor before his own altar." Diana looked at him, her gaze calm but piercing. "I deny nothing. I seek only what your Emperor sought, hope without chains." Malki's eyes filled with fury. "Then you will bring ruin upon us all." Perhaps, Diana said. But better ruin born of truth than empire built on fear." He drew his pistol, but Veridiana's blade intercepted it before it could rise. The sound of steel against steel echoed across the square. The canoness turned to him, her voice cold and final. "Enough. You have condemned too many in his name." Malki's lips parted, but no words came. He lowered the weapon slowly, trembling with rage and uncertainty. Diana looked upon them both, her voice quiet. "All faith is your choice as mine is mine, but the galaxy you worship is dying because no one remembers how to choose." The bells began to toll once more, not in mourning, but in defiance. The people rose to their feet, their faces lit by the last glow of dawn, and in that moment something shifted, not in the heavens but in the hearts of those who listened. The Imperium had called her heretic, the people had named her saint. But now, standing beneath the rising light, Diana became something else entirely, an idea too dangerous for both heaven and hell to contain. The dawn after her defiance was brief. The light had barely touched the spires of the Basilica Eternal when the Inquisition's answer came, iron-winged transports descending like vultures, their engines screaming penitence. The banners of the Ordo Hereticus unfurled across the skyline, black and gold, emblazoned with the sigil of judgment. Soldiers of faith flooded the streets. Their chants drowned the morning wind. Diana did not resist when they came for her. She had seen enough of this galaxy to know that mercy to those ruled by fear was indistinguishable from rebellion. Viridiana tried to stop them, her sword drawn, voice trembling with fury, but Diana placed a hand upon her arm. "Do not fight them," she said softly. "They are blind, not evil. Blindness can be healed. Fear cannot." The canoness's throat tightened. "They will kill you." Diana's gaze was calm. "Perhaps, but they will see me first." She allowed herself to be taken. Chains bound her wrists, not out of necessity, but ritual. She was led through the streets where only hours before the people had cheered her name. Now they knelt in silence as she passed, faces pale with dread, unsure whether to pray or weep. The bells tolled again, slow, deliberate, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The square before the basilica had been transformed into a stage of devotion and death. A great cross-shaped scaffold stood at its center, its wood darkened by age and ash. Upon it the inquisitors would burn her alive, not as punishment but as spectacle, proof that faith could not be rewritten by miracles. Malky himself waited at the foot of the pyre, his face gaunt, his eyes shadowed by sleepless conviction. "You could have fled," he said as she was brought before him. "You could have become legend. Instead, you chose this." "Legends do not teach," she replied. "They are worshipped. I would rather die truthfully than live as another idol." He studied her for a long moment. "Do you know why I hate you?" "I know why you fear me." Malky's lips curled into something between a smile and a wound. "You think you carry light, but I have seen light twisted by the warp into something unholy. You call it compassion. I call it contagion. It spreads and faith with it." "The faith that fears compassion," Diana said quietly, "it was never faith at all." He turned away, gesturing to the priests. "Prepare the rites." They bound her to the cross with chains inscribed in holy oil. The scent of burning incense filled the square as torches were lit. Above the crowd, banners fluttered in the rising wind. The sky was heavy with grey clouds, their edges glowing faintly with the memory of her power still lingering in the heavens. Viridiana stood among the sisters, her armor scorched from battle, but her spirit unbroken. Her hands trembled as she whispered prayers not of obedience but of courage. Around her, others wept. Some prayed for Diana's soul, others for forgiveness. As the first torch was lowered, Diana lifted her head. Her voice carried across the plaza, clear, resonant, almost unreal in its calm. "I have seen worlds devoured by their gods. I have seen mortals rise above them. You worship a silence and call it truth. You fear the unknown and call it purity. But faith is not obedience. It is love without reward." The inquisitors shouted for silence, but the crowd did not move. Her words flowed like a tide, drowning the ritual. "If I die today, let it not be for heresy, but for memory, that once even here compassion lived." The torch touched the base of the pyre. Flames rose, orange and gold, licking the air. The heat should have devoured her, but instead it shimmered harmlessly around her body, as if the fire itself hesitated. The priests faltered, eyes wide with disbelief. The crowd gasped. Malky stumbled back. "Oh no," he hissed. "No false miracles." But it was no miracle. The flames swirled upward, reshaping into wings of light that stretched across the square. Diana's chains melted, falling like molten tears. The fire bent to her will, spiraling into a halo of pure radiance. Viridiana fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Around her, the sisters wept openly. Even those who had doubted now bowed their heads, overcome by something greater than fear. Diana's voice echoed above the roaring flame. "You cannot silence what is not bound by worship. The truth will live beyond me." Malky, trembling, drew his pistol and fired. The shot struck her chest, but there was no blood, only light. It spread from the wound, consuming the bullet, the gun, the man himself in a wave of golden brilliance. When it faded, she still stood, her body radiant, her eyes filled with sorrow. Malky knelt before her, his weapon forgotten, his voice breaking. "What are you?" "I am what you could be," she said softly, "if you remembered what you were meant to protect." Then she stepped down from the cross. The crowd parted like the sea. Some reached out to touch her, others simply wept, their tears mingling with the rain that began to fall. She turned to Veridiana. "The fire cannot kill what is truth," she said, "but truth must still walk among the ashes." Veridiana nodded, her voice trembling. "What will you do now?" Diana looked to the horizon where the storm gathered once more. There are worlds that still burn, and a god who still sleeps. The rain fell harder, extinguishing what remained of the pyre. The flames hissed and died, leaving only steam rising into the morning air. For in that silence, a single phrase rippled through the crowd, whispered first, then shouted, then sung. She rose from the fire. Malky wept where he knelt, his faith shattered but his soul awakened. Veridiana watched as Diana walked into the mist, her figure fading like a dream that refused to end. And for the first time in centuries, Ophelia 7 felt something purer than fear. It felt hope. The rain did not cease for 3 days. It fell over the city like morning, washing the blood from the stones and the ashes from the sky. The fires of judgment had been extinguished, but their smoke lingered still, twisting above the basilica eternal like a ghost that refused to leave. The faithful whispered of miracles, of a saint who walked unharmed through holy fire, while others spoke of blasphemy given flesh. The Imperium itself trembled, its truth challenged by something that could not be silenced or slain. Diana wandered the ruined streets, her armor dulled, her cloak soaked through. She had not rested since the trial. She had felt the eyes of the people upon her, not in fear but in reverence. It weighed on her more heavily than any chain. Wherever she walked, they followed, priests, sisters, wounded civilians, seeking her blessing, her word, her approval. And though she offered them kindness, her heart grew heavy with every prayer spoken in her name. She had tried to flee faith, yet it pursued her like a shadow. Veridiana found her at dawn, standing beneath the broken statue of Saint Catherine. The canoness's armor had been polished, but her face betrayed sleeplessness. "They have begun building shrines," she said quietly. "They call them sanctuaries of the Golden Saint. Pilgrims travel across the system to see you." Diana did not look at her. "I told them not to. I told them not to." "A faith cannot be told," Veridiana replied. "It grows where it is needed. Then it grows from fear," Diana said, "and fear always becomes a weapon." The canoness stepped closer, her tone cautious. "A Malky has disappeared. The Inquisition ships left orbit the day after your trial." "I think they fear you." "A fear is not understanding," Diana murmured. "They will return when they find the courage to hate again." Veridiana hesitated. "And what of you? What will you do now?" Diana's gaze lifted to the sky, where clouds churned with strange colors, veins of purple and red pulsing faintly through the gray. The warp storms had grown stronger since the fire that failed to kill her. The air itself hummed, alive with whispers she could not ignore. "There's something stirs beyond this world," she said. "There's something that knows my name." That night the visions returned. She dreamt of the warp as a vast ocean of screams, its waves made of memory and sin. From its depths rose forms both divine and monstrous. She saw her own reflection within it, her face fractured into infinite versions of herself, each one wearing a crown of fire. "You cannot run from faith," the voices whispered. "You have become its new shape." She woke with a start, the scent of ozone heavy in the air. Around her the candles had extinguished themselves. The basilica trembled. Veridiana rushed in, sword drawn. "Another attack?" "No," Diana said, rising slowly, "and not yet. Something worse." Outside, the sky was alive with lightning, not natural, but warp-born, spiraling through the clouds in shapes that resembled wings. The pilgrims who had gathered in the square fell to their knees, crying her name. But amid their devotion, another sound rose, a low, rhythmic chanting that did not belong to them. From the shadows beyond the basilica's walls they came, cloaked figures, their faces hidden by gilded masks shaped like her own. They bore torches and relics made in imitation of her lasso, her blade, her shield. "The saint has transcended flesh," they cried. "Her light belongs to all." Veridiana's blood ran cold. "Who are they?" "Those who twist what they worship," Diana said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. The cult surged forward, their chants turning to screams. They overpowered the guards, flooding the plaza in a tide of gold and madness. The sisters fired warning shots, but it only fueled the frenzy. The air shimmered as some of the zealots began to glow unnaturally, their bodies warping with demonic energy. The warp had found its vessel through their faith. Diana moved into their path, her voice carrying like thunder. A stop, for a heartbeat they did. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her, wide with devotion. Then the leader stepped forward, a tall man draped in crimson robes, his mask cracked to reveal skin that pulsed like molten wax. "You are the vessel of salvation," he said, his voice layered with many others. "Through you the gods speak. Through you we ascend." "Oh no," Diana said firmly. "I am not your god." He raised his arms, laughter echoing from somewhere beyond mortal hearing. "Well, then we will make you one." The ground split open. Warp fire erupted, twisting the plaza into a storm of color and agony. Pilgrims screamed as their faith turned against them, consuming them in light too bright to bear. Diana threw her shield forward, absorbing the flames, but the energy burned through her, ancient and endless. She fought not against soldiers, but against belief itself, raw, unshaped, and uncontrollable. Every blow she struck turned into worship. Every word she spoke became scripture. The more she resisted, the stronger they became. "Diana!" Veridiana's voice cut through the chaos. "You can't fight them. They've already made you holy." Diana's eyes widened with realization. The warp fed on faith, not hatred. It did not care whether it was praise or fear. It only needed belief. And now belief in her was spreading faster than any corruption. She dropped her sword. "Then I must unmake myself." "What are you doing?" Veridiana cried. Ending this, Diana closed her eyes. The light around her flared once more, but this time it was not defiance, it was surrender. It was surrender. She drew every ounce of power inward, containing it, compressing it until her body trembled with unbearable strain. The cult screamed, their energy faltering as their connection to the warp began to collapse. For an instant, the world stood still. Then a burst of radiance tore through the plaza, washing over everything in a blinding wave. When it faded, the cult was gone. Only ashes remained. Diana knelt amid the silence, her body dimming, her aura fading like the last ember of a dying flame. Veridiana rushed to her side. "You're weakening." "I've cut their faith from the warp," Diana whispered. "But it won't hold for long. They will return in another form. Faith always does." Veridiana gripped her hand tightly. "Then we'll fight it together." Diana's gaze softened. "No, you must guard what I leave behind." She looked toward the sky, where the warp still flickered faintly, its colors shifting like a living wound. "I must go where it began." "The warp?" Veridiana whispered. "Yes," Diana said. "If the gods of this realm wish to make me theirs, then I will meet them in their own darkness." As she rose, her light flickered once more. The canoness bowed her head, unable to speak. Diana's final words lingered like prophecy. "If I return, it will not be as their saint, but as their reckoning." The day she vanished into the warp, the sun above Ophelia CV died. It did not fade gently, but extinguished as if swallowed whole. Darkness swept across the shrine world, broken only by the dim red glow of burning cathedrals and the desperate light of 1,000 candles trembling in the hands of the faithful. The ecclesiarchy called it divine punishment. The people called it abandonment, but for the Sisters of Battle it was something worse. The silence before judgment. For 40 days there was no word, no miracle, no sign, no trace of the woman who had defied gods and men alike. Yet her memory lingered in every hymn, every whispered prayer. The shrines raised in her name had been destroyed by decree, but their ashes became relics, and when the imperial fleets returned, they did not find submission. They found defiance. Veridiana stood upon the steps of the Basilica Eternal, her armor cracked, her eyes hollow with sleepless nights. Around her, the sisters formed ranks, their numbers thinned, but their faith unbroken. Above them, the banners of the ecclesiarchy fluttered alongside new ones, golden threads woven with the sigil of the lasso, the mark of Diana. The vox crackled with the voice of an imperial commander. "A canoness Veridiana, by order of the Synod Ministra and the Ordo Hereticus, you are commanded to surrender the Basilica Eternal. Lay down your arms and mercy will be granted." Veridiana lifted the transmitter, her voice calm but iron. "Your mercy burns planets. You will find no surrender here." "Then you are heretic," came the reply. "No," she whispered. "We are what you forgot to be." The transmission ended. Moments later, the bombardment began. The ground shook as orbital fire rained down upon the holy city. The spires shattered, statues of saints crumbled into dust, and the stained glass of the great cathedrals shattered like fragile memory. Yet the sisters stood their ground, their chants rising above the roar of destruction. Through fire, faith endures. Through pain, truth prevails. Veridiana moved among them, her voice carrying like a blade through the chaos. "Hold your lines. The Emperor does not demand death. He demands meaning. Make them see that we remember what he cannot speak. When the first wave landed, it came in iron and fury, regiments of stormtroopers, banners of purity flapping beneath the burning sky. They advanced with mechanical precision, bolters roaring, their faith unquestioning. But faith without vision is brittle, and the sisters fought with something far stronger. They fought with belief born not from command, but conviction. The first charge broke against the basilica's walls like a tide against stone. A holy promethium turned the streets into rivers of flame. The hymns of the sisters echoed through the ruin, their voices unshaken even as the dead fell beside them. And then, as the second wave pressed forward, the sky itself split open. A rift tore across the clouds, vast, luminous, and terrible. From its depths spilled light that was neither holy nor profane. The bombardment ceased. The ships in orbit faltered. Every soldier, every sister, every pilgrim turned their eyes upward. She returned. Diana descended through the storm like a falling star, her armor glowing with the fire of worlds unseen. But there was something different now, something vast and sorrowful in her presence. The light around her pulsed like a heartbeat, and within it the air shimmered with visions. For an instant they all saw the halls of Olympus collapsing, the warp screaming, gods kneeling before truth they could not comprehend. When her feet touched the scorched marble of the basilica, silence fell. Even the cannons ceased. The stormtroopers froze where they stood, unable to raise their weapons. The sisters bowed their heads. Veridiana took a step forward, tears cutting through the grime on her face. "You came back." "I said I would," Diana answered softly. Her voice carried not through sound, but through every heart that still dared to feel. "What did you find?" Veridiana asked. "A gods," Diana said. "And what they fear most, reflection." She lifted her hand and the rift above began to twist. Within it forms writhed, the echoes of the chaos gods, howling in fury, unable to cross the barrier she had woven between realms. "They cannot be destroyed," she said, "only understood, and those who understand them too deeply become them." Malky emerged from the ruins, armor scorched, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion and disbelief. "You returned from the warp," he whispered. "And no soul returns from the warp untouched. What are you now?" Diana turned toward him, her gaze unflinching. "What you made me, a truth you tried to burn." He raised his weapon, trembling. "Then you are the end of us all." "No," she said. "I am the beginning." Before he could fire, the ground cracked open. Warp energy surged beneath the basilica, tearing through the streets. The spirits of the dead rose in flashes of blue light. Sisters, soldiers, pilgrims, all caught between life and death, bound to the faith that had consumed them. The warp sought to claim them, to reclaim the fragments of belief that belonged to its chaos. Diana stepped forward, spreading her arms. Her aura expanded, a radiance that pushed against the storm. "You will not take them," she cried. "Their faith belongs to no god." The light poured from her, enveloping the spirits. One by one they faded, not into the warp, but into peace. The storm began to still. The rift above the world flickered, its edges collapsing. When it was over, the sky cleared. The stars returned, faint but real. The fires dimmed to embers. Veridiana fell to her knees, her body trembling. Around her, the surviving sisters did the same. "You've done it," she whispered. "You freed them." Diana's eyes were distant. "A freedom has a cost." Malky dropped his weapon. "In what of you?" he asked. He looked up at the fading rift. "I will close what I opened. This galaxy cannot bear both its gods and me." "No," Veridiana said, standing. "You can't leave us again." Diana smiled faintly. "You never needed me. You needed to remember yourselves." As she turned toward the sky, the light around her grew brighter, breaking against the broken marble like sunrise. Her final words carried on the wind, soft but eternal. "A faith without chains is truth. Keep it." The rift closed. The sky turned gold, and where she had stood there was nothing, only the echo of her heartbeat in the quiet of the dawn. Veridiana bowed her head. "Go with peace, my friend," she whispered. Around her the sisters began to sing, not hymns of obedience, but songs of remembrance. Their voices rose with the first light of morning, and for the first time in the history of the Imperium, the Basilica Eternal did not belong to the Emperor, it belonged to hope. The light that followed her departure lingered like the afterglow of creation. It bathed the ruins of the Basilica Eternal, filling the cracks in the marble, glinting upon the melted remains of banners and relics. Yet for all its beauty, it was hollow, a light without warmth. The people of Ophelia 7 stood in its radiance as if caught between salvation and loss, unsure whether to rejoice or mourn. Veridiana watched from the steps, her armor dented and her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Around her, The surviving sisters moved among the wounded, their prayers whispered more out of habit than conviction. For the first time in her life, Veridiana felt what she had never dared to name, a world without command. Days passed and the planet did not burn. No retribution came from Terra, no voice of condemnation from the Synod. The Inquisition was silent. It was as though the entire galaxy paused to listen, to see if the miracle would echo again. But it did not, and in that silence faith began to fracture. Rumors spread like veins of infection. Some said Diana had ascended to the golden throne itself to speak with the Emperor. Others whispered that she had fallen into the warp and become its new saint, ruling from within. Pilgrims debated, priests argued, soldiers fought. Even among the sisters, doubt took root. Veridiana sought refuge within the shattered cathedral, kneeling before the broken altar where the flames had once burned heretics and martyrs alike. The golden Aquila lay cracked in two, its wings darkened by soot. She placed her hand upon it and whispered, "You gave us silence, my lord." Was that mercy or judgment? No answer came. Outside, thunder rolled through the clouds. The storms had returned, not of the warp but of nature. Lightning forked across the horizon, flashing through the hollow spires like veins of light in dying bone. The air was heavy with static and memory. Malky approached from the shadows. His once pristine robes were torn and stained, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He no longer carried his weapon or his insignia of office. "You still pray to him," he said quietly. "After all you've seen." Veridiana did not turn. "I pray to what I remember of him." "And what is that?" "That he believed in humanity," she said softly. "Not the Empire, not the Church, not even the throne. Just us." Malky stepped closer, his voice a whisper. "She believed that too." Veridiana looked up. "And you condemned her for it." "And you condemned her for it." "I condemned what I could not understand," he said. "That has been our sin since the first flame was lit." The canoness rose slowly, facing him. "Then seek understanding now. She left you that chance." His expression trembled between faith and despair. "You think she reached him? She reached something," Veridiana said. "Perhaps not what we call the Emperor, but what he once was before the throne turned him to stone." The Inquisitor's gaze drifted toward the sky. "If she spoke to him, then why does he remain silent?" "Perhaps he is listening," she said. For the first time in 10,000 years, that night Malky dreamt of gold. He dreamt of a vast chamber lit by the hum of machines and prayers. The golden throne loomed before him, endless, divine, and dreadful. Upon it sat the Emperor, still and radiant, his eyes like empty suns, and before him knelt a figure of light and shadow. "Why do you not speak?" Diana's voice echoed through the dream, soft but heavy with defiance. "Your people kill in your name. They worship your corpse. Is this what you wanted?" The Emperor did not move. The machinery pulsed around him, the sound like a heartbeat restrained by chains. The silence was unbearable. "I have walked your galaxy," she said. "I have seen faith wielded as a weapon, love turned into law. If you still exist within that shell, then show them mercy." A flicker, a movement of light behind the throne, faint as breath, and then words not spoken but felt. "Mercy was mine once. They made it into chains." Diana bowed her head. "Then let me unmake them." The silence deepened. The light around the throne dimmed. When it returned, she was gone. Malky woke in a cold sweat, the echo of her voice still in his mind. He stumbled from his quarters into the storm, rain lashing against the stone. He found Veridiana outside the basilica, standing beneath the broken sky. She went to him, he said breathlessly, "I saw it." The canoness looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Her dreams are not truth." "This one was," he whispered. She spoke to him, and he answered. "What did he say?" Malky hesitated. That mercy was once his, and they took it from him. The canoness's breath caught. Then she was right. The two of them stood in silence as thunder rolled across the horizon. Above, lightning flashed through the clouds in shapes that almost resembled wings. "Do you think she's gone forever?" Malky asked. Veridiana closed her eyes. "She's not gone. She's waiting, somewhere between gods and men." In the following weeks, the Imperium sent no more fleets. No inquisitors arrived. No crusades were declared. Ophelia 7 remained untouched, forgotten in its ruin. But whispers spread through the void, of priests preaching compassion over command, of sisters refusing to burn the guilty, of soldiers laying down arms in the name of mercy. The ecclesiarchy called it heresy. The people called it Faith Reborn. And far beyond, where light and darkness merged into one endless horizon, a figure walked between the stars, neither divine nor mortal, her armor fractured, her lasso glowing like the last remnant of truth. She did not speak. She did not pray. She simply walked, and wherever she went, the warp grew still. The God Emperor remained silent. But in that silence, the galaxy began to remember the sound of choice. The centuries that followed her ascension blurred into myth. Histories became hymns, and truth became scripture, each retelling bending her memory to fit the shape of a god. The Imperium called her the Saint of the Rift, a heretic who defied judgment and vanished into light. The ecclesiarchy tried to erase her name, but the people whispered it in secret, carved it into hidden walls, and taught it to their children beneath the roar of orbital sermons. On worlds too far for the High Lords to reach, her story survived. Ophelia 7 endured. It no longer served as the heart of the ecclesiarchy, but as a world of pilgrimage for those who sought the lost purity of faith before the chains of empire. The Basilica Eternal, rebuilt from its own ruin, stood as both shrine and scar, a place where the faithful came not to worship, but to remember. Danby, Viridiana lived to see it rise. Her hair turned white beneath her helm, her once unshakable voice grown quiet with age. She no longer led armies or commanded sisters. She guided those who still believed that faith could exist without tyranny. Some called her the Keeper of the Ashes. She preferred the silence of that title. She spent her final years writing, not scripture but memory. Every night she sat by candlelight, quill in hand, inscribing the truth of Diana's life as she had witnessed it. The church would call her mad. The Ordo would burn her words if they ever found them. But she wrote anyway, believing that somewhere in the dark between stars, Diana might still hear her thoughts. The truth endures, she whispered as she wrote the final line. And mercy remembers. When she died, the sisters buried her beneath the basilica at the foot of the same altar where she had once defied the Inquisition. Her tomb bore no icon, only a single engraving in ancient script. She followed the light that feared no god. For many years after, peace, fragile and uncertain, lingered. Then came the storms. It began as a tremor through the warp, subtle but growing. Astropaths across the segmentum screamed and went blind. The stars flickered like dying embers. On 1,000 worlds, the air thickened with the taste of ash. The Imperium feared another great rift, another age of madness. But on Ophelia 7 the storm was different. It began with light. The pilgrims saw it first. An aurora that stretched across the horizon, golden and blue, shimmering as though the sky itself were remembering her. At its heart stood a figure, faint and distant, walking upon air. They said she came in silence. No thunder, no fire, only the sound of wind through the ruined spires. She descended once more to the steps of the basilica, though the world she had left was now older, colder, and filled with ghosts of what had been. Diana's armor was cracked, her cloak faded, yet her presence was the same. Terrible in its grace, gentle in its power. Those who saw her could not tell if she was flesh or spirit. The light around her was both halo and shroud. The sisters fell to their knees, trembling. A young canoness, sworn in Viridiana's lineage, stepped forward. "A saint of wrath," she whispered, tears glinting beneath her helm. "Why have you returned?" Diana's eyes, deep as the void, met hers. Because the silence has ended, the canoness's breath caught. "You spoke with him?" Diana nodded once. "The Emperor does not speak in words, he dreams in sorrow. His dream has become your prison." The crowd gathered, their hearts caught between awe and terror. "Then what must we do?" "Awake him," she said simply. Not to rule, but to rest. No one understood, but her voice carried the certainty of prophecy. She turned toward the sky, where the warp shimmered faintly beyond the clouds. "The warp has grown hungry. The gods whisper louder than ever. They seek to break what I have held closed." The canoness stepped closer. "Then we will fight beside you." Diana smiled faintly. "No, you will not fight, you will remember." She raised her hand, and from her palm radiated the light of countless souls, the echoes of all who had fallen in the name of faith. They gathered around her like stars, each one a fragment of mercy long forgotten. The basilica shook. The sky tore open. From within the rift poured the shapes of the great chaos gods, vast and unseen yet felt in every trembling bone. Their whispers filled the world. "You cannot win, daughter of false Olympus. You are ours. You are faith's end." Diana's voice rose, not in fury but in sorrow. "No, I am its beginning." She spread her arms, and the light of her soul ignited. The heavens blazed. The warp howled as her radiance filled it, tearing through corruption like dawn through storm clouds. The power that had once chained her now flowed freely, not as weapon, but as truth. Across the galaxy, psychers wept as visions filled their minds, of cities rebuilt in compassion, of soldiers lowering their guns, of priests weeping as they remembered what mercy once meant. For a single instant, the entire Imperium saw what it had forgotten, the possibility of grace. And then silence again. The light faded, the rift closed, the sky cleared, the figure of Diana was gone. Only the faint hum of her power remained, woven into the fabric of the world. The canoness looked upward, her voice breaking. "She's gone. Again. One of the sisters knelt beside her, touching the scorched marble where Diana had stood. "I know," she said softly. "She's everywhere now." The canoness looked around. The golden light lingered, not in the sky, but within the faces of those around her, each sister, each pilgrim, glowing faintly with its reflection. The realization struck her like breath restored. She didn't die, she whispered. She became faith itself. In the millennia that followed, her name was forbidden once more. The ecclesiarchy called her legend, the ordo called her lie. Yet her story endured, passed in secret, spoken in the quiet between prayers. It was said that when the galaxy was darkest, when the Emperor's light faltered, a whisper would return, a woman's voice calm as dawn, saying, "Remember the truth that burns kindly." And so even in the age of endless war, when gods screamed and stars fell, somewhere deep within the hearts of mortals, a quiet flame remained. It was not faith in gods, it was faith in one another, and that was her last prayer.